Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mike Allen, and I'm the seventh president of Barry University. We thank you for joining our Earth Sustainability webinar today, led in partnership by Barry University and the CLEO Institute. This is such an exciting week for us here at Barry as we welcome around 800 new students to our campus and welcome back several thousand returners. We're all so blessed in different ways with what we're able to do for a living, but there's really nothing quite like the promise, the inspiration of students at the start of their academic journey. Or for that matter, the stress of parents who are trying to move them into campus on a rainy day like today. But nevertheless, it is a very special time to be on a college campus. These students and really young people all around the world are the next generation of change makers and the real reason why we're all here today. This past spring, we were honored to welcome many local resiliency experts to our campus here at Barry for a symposium on sustainability and resiliency solutions, and specifically what our role could be as a university to contribute to these efforts. We remain so grateful for the time and the willingness of those individuals who shared their expertise, several of whom you'll hear from today. One of the key takeaways from that time together was the need for continuing open dialogue and the importance of tackling issues in real time with an action-oriented focus, which brings us to this webinar today. Most of you remember well the dangerous flooding events that have occurred in South Florida over the past year, leaving so many with waterlogged homes and cars and other damage. Unfortunately, this has become an all too regular occurrence and extends far beyond a few individuals with property damage. Our climate crisis is real and it is fully upon us. The purpose of our discussion today is to revisit the preparation and the response to these past weather events and to identify areas for improvement. At the same time, we must also continue to address the root causes of these conditions and find ways to work together across all sectors of our community to address our resiliency here in South Florida. We are most grateful to advocate, philanthropist, and businessman Dr. Sam Nappy and his wife Carol, whose generosity and support of Barry is driving impact-oriented research and helped make today's webinar possible. And special thanks to Yoga and our friends at the CLEO Institute, as well as the staff and the faculty here at Barry who are working to establish the Earth Sustainability Initiative. It is now my pleasure to share a welcome message and also to congratulate the newly re-elected mayor of Miami-Dade County, Daniela Levine Cava.
Hello, everyone. I'm your Miami-Dade County Mayor, Daniela Levine Cava. It's an honor to virtually address today's webinar. Thank you, President Mike Allen, for the introduction. Thank you also to Barry University's Earth Sustainability Program and the CLEO Institute for hosting this discussion. I'm very proud to know that Barry University is discussing critical environmental issues and convening experts. Today is proof of that. Here in Miami-Dade, we're ground zero for the effects of climate change. We're feeling the hottest summers on record, facing more severe storms, and of course, adapting to and mitigating more intense flooding. The June storms were just a test of what is to come. And it was an all-hands-on-deck operation. Through the inclement weather, our county responded in a multitude of ways, each demonstrating the importance of partnership. Our operators answered hundreds of 311 calls. Our frontline workers drained flooded streets and kept our pumps working without rest. Our communicators kept nearly 3 million residents updated around the clock. Our first responders went door to door doing wellness checks. We partnered with our cities to spread a message of safety, and residents everywhere stepped up for each other in ways big and small. It was a reminder of all the moving parts that it takes to be prepared and recover smoothly. But we must also address the root of the problem. My administration is acting on countywide efforts to mitigate the impacts of climate change and prepare for future storms and flooding. We're investing in our stormwater management system and hardening our infrastructure. And thanks to our efforts, FEMA upgraded our flood preparedness rating this year, which gave residents and business owners in unincorporated Miami-Dade a 35% discount on flood insurance premiums. Looking forward, I'll continue to emphasize coordination and engagement with our cities and community partners, such as our universities. We just hosted a productive roundtable on tackling flooding together with our cities last week, because water does not care about municipal boundaries or anything else that divides us. Floods affect our entire community, so we must be prepared and stand together. Today's panel will shed more light on how we can, and I'm proud to have our county's Department of Emergency Management Director, Pete Gomez, representing. I wish you a fruitful and solution-oriented discussion today. Together, we'll face the challenges that flooding brings head on.
Thank you, Mayor Levine Cava, and thank you, Pete, for representing the mayor today. We are so grateful for both of your leadership. And now the newest member of our leadership team here at Bayer University, our provost, Dr. Pablo Ortiz, will serve as the moderator for today's discussion. Dr. Ortiz, please take it from here.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Dr. Allen. South Florida is ground zero for understanding the fragility of our environment. So we are grateful to lead this crucial discussion alongside the CLEO Institute. Today's discussion is intended to bridge the gap between science and application, with particular attention paid to the impact of environmental change on communities. The onslaught of rain the week of June 10th caused massive flooding, thousands of power outages, closed roads, and disrupted air traffic for both Miami-Dade and Broward counties. Flooding stranded thousands of motorists, damaged vehicles and homes, and strained our fragile infrastructure yet again. Despite the many adaptation initiatives, it is clear that more needs to be done. But what? What were the lessons learned? Can we stop framing the torrential downpours as once-in-a-millennium moments and understand them as ongoing challenges that must be systematically addressed rather than dismissed because of their supposed infrequency? How can residents be better equipped to understand these potential hazards? To discuss these issues, we are pleased to have three specialists with us today. First, Pete Gomez is a director of the Miami-Dade Department of Energy Management and is responsible for developing, implementing, and administering the county's comprehensive emergency management plan. Pete has been involved in emergency management for nearly 4 decades and has deep experience at the local, state, and federal and international levels. Yoka Arditi Rocha is the executive director of the CLEO Institute in Florida, where she works with policymakers and stakeholders to build climate resilience and mobilize climate action. Yoka has participated in UN climate negotiation conferences of parties and has been a sustainability advisor for schools, colleges, and organizations. And finally, we have Mario Ariza. Mario is an investigative reporter for Floodlight. He has written for the Miami Herald, the New Republic, and NPR. He's the author of Disposable City, Miami's Future on the Shores of Climate Catastrophe, and a recently published article in The Atlantic on June 18th titled, Miami is Entering a State of Unreality. Welcome to all of our panelists. Good afternoon. And we are going to get right into the conversations and discussions today. I'm going to start really painting a picture, a broader picture of the challenge that we face, not only here in South Florida, but also throughout the state and throughout the country. And I'm going to start with you, Mario, because in your article that I just mentioned, Miami is entering a state of unreality, you make some very bold statements within this article based on the investigations that you have conducted over the last several years. And I want to quote, it says, rain bombs such as Invest 90L, which was, of course, the rain event that we just experienced, are products of our hotter world. Warmer air has more room between its molecules for moisture. The water is coming for Greater Miami and the 6 million people who live here. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration forecasts that South Florida could see almost 11 extra inches of ocean by 2040. So Mario, as you've been conducting these investigations and learning about the challenges that we're all facing, what are some things that you have found in your work, but in particular, what have you found to be very surprising through your efforts?
Thank you so much, Dr. Ortiz, and thank you so much, everybody, for having me here. I think the most surprising thing is what we don't talk about or how we talk about what we're talking about, right? We're 11 minutes into this discussion, and I don't believe we've said the term greenhouse gases. We haven't talked about the fossil fuel industry, and we haven't talked about how the greenhouse gases produced by the fossil fuel industry and the energy network that humans have with their industrial economy is only increasing, and it's only increasing the amount of global warming that we are going to expect. Every single gigaton of greenhouse gases that we put into the atmosphere, and the US puts about 36 a year, please check me on that fact, makes Pete's job harder. And it makes Pete's jobs harder because it makes emergencies both more acute and more common. And the fact that we're talking about this today in language that is designed to be depoliticized, in language that is designed to not attract the ire of a particular group, is the result of 30 years of a disinformation and influence campaign put forward by the fossil fuel industry in their attempt to make sure that their product is not restricted and continues to be sold. Now, we could have been having this conversation a generation ago. We're not. We're having this conversation today. And that means that the water is rising swiftly, and that we need to talk about not just reducing greenhouse gases at the same time that we talk about mitigating their effects and learning to live with the water in South Florida. But what has struck me the most in all my years of writing about this is that the path to a sustainable, survivable future in South Florida is really narrow, and that we keep making it more narrow by putting more greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. Full stop.
Thank you, Mario, for that really wonderful introduction to this conversation. Right, you brought up now some elements that we need to address, and I'm going to turn over to you, Yoko, because I think he's touched on a couple of points that I know the CLEO Institute is very much engaged in. Right, at the core mission of the CLEO Institute, as I mentioned, is public educating the public, engagement, activation, ensuring that we're all aware of this. But Mario mentions that had we been speaking about this issue a century ago, we might be in a better place. But this problem didn't start today. It did not start in June when this rain event occurred. In fact, what we're finding is that the global sea level levels have risen by an average of about 8 to 9 inches since 1880. So the problem is coming from a long time, and climate change is projected to further accelerate sea level rise. Globally, the media projections for additional sea level rise by 2040 is roughly 7 inches from where we are today. This presents a critical issue. This is not just a problem that Miami is facing or Miami-Dade is facing. We heard about greenhouse gases. The CLEO Institute is out front, engaging in these conversations. So talk to us about what grassroots organizations like the CLEO Institute can do to influence policy changes at the local, at the state, at the national level, to help us engage the right audience and the right people that can help turn this pattern around.
Thank you, Dr. Tees, and thank you to Barry University for your ongoing partnership. I'm really excited about this conversation. And Mario, as always, hit the nail on the head. And this is the elephant in the room. We are just putting too much carbon pollution into our atmosphere, which is warming our planet, which is warming our ocean, which is making all these events more stronger, exacerbated, more costly, and making Pete's job more difficult, as he said. And this is something that at the CLEO Institute for more than 14 years we've been shining light on. And I'll just put it into perspective. In 2015, the CLEO Institute brought in students wearing life jacket into the Board County Commission, demanding action from our county officials. And that was when we finally were able to put in a line item into the county's budget to create what we know now today as the Office of Resilience. So see, this is the kind of work that the CLEO Institute has been leading. We're not only grassroots, we are also grass tops. So we use our power, our knowledge to galvanize public opinion, to mobilize the masses, to communicate complex scientific terms, to make it simple for the lay public to understand. So it's a bottom-up, top-down approach that has been at the core of the CLEO Institute's playbook that has enabled us to really spark statewide and nationwide conversations, shaping policies and encouraging legislative action that supports bold and equity-centered, people-centered solutions. And that's what we're really proud about. At the end of the day, this is a solvable crisis. We have the solutions to reduce greenhouse gases. What we have is an agency gap, and it's that collective action, that collective will that we need to really spark, so we can so we are able to confront the crisis with the speed and scale that it deserves.
Thank you, Yoka, and make that bold statement, right? That this is a solvable crisis, and I think that that's really a very powerful message for us to hear and to sort of wrap our heads around about regarding really what has to happen next. So Pete, you're on the hot seat now, and we've already heard you and your job mentioned by both Mario and Yoka. I think you probably have the toughest job that one has to face, in particular in a region like ours in Miami-Dade County. But I'm gonna paint a bleak picture for you, Pete, before I ask you the question, because I think it'll speak to the challenges that you're facing in your job, right? So in the next 20 years, the average winter temperatures are projected to rise above 60 degrees. Also in the next 20 years, the average summer temperatures are projected to rise to 83 degrees. And we know what that means in terms of the impact of sea level rise and our ability to mitigate and manage the excess water that we're going to be dealing with. And we also just heard from Mayor Levine Cava, and I do agree with Mario that this is it should be a depoliticized conversation. And the mayor, made a statement where she says that the storms that we experienced in June are just a test of what's to come. And in that same statement, she says we must address the root of the problem. So let's first take a broader approach to the work you're doing. How does Miami-Dade coordinate with state and federal agencies to ensure that we are better prepared, that we are doing what we can to prepare our community against these really inevitable weather impacts that we're going to be facing?
Thank you, Dr. Ortiz, and thank you, Barry University, for convening this panel. I think Yoka and Mario both hit the nail on the head, that this is a solvable problem, but we can't put our heads in the sand and ignore the obvious, right? I'm fortunate because I worked for a mayor that doesn't deny us the ability to use certain words like climate change, for example. And we can talk about it. And if we're going to talk about it at whatever level, especially at the policy level, then you're going to be able to make changes. When you ignore, as I believe Yoka said, the elephant in the room, then you're never going to solve this issue. Now, in the Office of Emergency Management, we try to coordinate with many groups, including the CLEO Institute, some of our community-based organizations, our non-governmental organizations. But as you mentioned, we communicate and collaborate with the state and the federal agencies. So the Florida Division of Emergency Management and FEMA are some of our biggest partners that we collaborate with in the response and the mitigation aspect of these events, right? As we speak, we're not going to stop this flooding from occurring. It's how do we mitigate it? In other words, how do we reduce that impact that it has to the community and the vulnerabilities to the folks, and then our response capabilities, right? Make sure that we're ready to respond to those things. So we take a very proactive approach in the local mitigation strategy, right? Where we put in projects that are going to help us mitigate these. I'll give you an example. Within RER, right, the department in Miami-Dade County that deals with stormwater and stormwater management, we collaborate with the South Florida Water Management District, and we put in for FEMA grants. They're known as Building Resiliency Infrastructure Community Grants, the BRIC grants. Last year, the year before, we put in for grants, and we were awarded a $50 million grant to be able to increase our capabilities in the C7, C8 canal so that we can minimize the impact that the rain has on the community, but also to be able to move that water if it's impacted. And we've done a lot of collaboration with FEMA in the past to get all kinds of hazard mitigation grants into this community. So we've been very successful at that. As as we're having this conversation on my emails, I just got notification that Miami-Dade County was awarded $25 million in state grant funding to assist in the flooding events, right? As a matter of fact, some of that money is going to that area that we witnessed last year, or I'm sorry, in June, that had some flooding in the North Miami area. But it goes, this goes real deep because the infrastructure that is in place in the stormwater systems is something that was designed 50 years ago, right? And I see Mario's, giving me the thumbs up. And, 50 years ago, nobody thought about climate change. They never thought about greenhouse gases. They never thought about global warming. They never thought about the waters getting warmer. And Dr. Ortiz, you mentioned something about, preparing for it. I want to let everybody know, I don't think these events like hurricane season is, they want to say from such and such a time to such and such a time. In my opinion, we don't have any more, events like that at a certain period of time. It's a year-round thing, right? From January 1st to December 31st is flood, heat, and hurricane season in Miami-Dade County. Just take a look at the last few years, how many flooding events we have had. You are mentioning the flooding event in June. Let's go back a few years when I first got on Miami-Dade County, 3 years into my tenure, in 3 days into my tenure, which was November of 2022, we had the flooding event in Cutler Bay, right? Last year, 24, we had the flooding event in northern Miami-Dade County, but predominantly in Fort Lauderdale. These events are going to keep coming. They're going to come faster. They're going to come more. They're going to be more intense. They're going to drop more water. They're going to hang around more. So we as a community need to be ready to respond and be able to take care of those issues. And I will say that Miami-Dade County has been taking those issues very seriously, in the millions and billions of dollars in trying to correct the infrastructure. It's not something that's going to happen overnight, but we are working towards it. And, we have the leadership that I think is going to push that along. And I will say this, we can't do it alone. Without, organizations like the CLEO Institute and some of these other non-governmental organizations helping to get the message out, pushing the button, we're never going to accomplish. So I'm very thankful that we're having these conversations and that we're pushing it forward. And, they said they make my job harder. I disagree. I think it makes my job easier to have the support of all these fine folks, because at least I have the backing to be able to do some things about it.
That was great, Pete. Thank you very much for really giving us a glimpse as to a lot of the work that's taking place and some of the challenges that you're facing. You actually brought up a point that I was going to bring up, is that we are dealing with a 21st century climate dilemma with an infrastructure that was designed back in the 20th century, right? And that presents a whole series of complications and challenges. I am a native Miamian, born and raised. I have seen this city grow from one of a reasonable size to now bursting at the seams. We've become one of the most popular destinations for people moving from other countries and out of the state. But I'm going to go back to you, Mario, because I saw you agreeing wholeheartedly with some of the points Pete was making. And again, going back to your article, Barry's not afraid, and we're not going to shy away from having the tough conversations, right? And today's conversation is really about moving from this science that we know is real and it's finally being accepted, I think, in a much broader way, to what really can happen and what are some of the recommendations we can walk away with. But you state, politicians promise resilience while ignoring emissions. Developers race to build a bounty of luxury condos, never mind the swiftly rising sea. Florida is entering a subtropical state of unreality in which these decisions don't add up. That is a point blank statement and a critique in many ways to the way that this challenge is being handled. Expand a little bit upon that. What are some of the things that you have found, and really, where do you see the opportunities for us to change that mindset?
Absolutely. That's a great question. So the idea that I would love listeners to walk away with is this concept of agnostic adaptation, right? An agnostic is somebody who says, oh yeah, God exists, but we don't can't know anything about him, or I don't believe anything specific about him. And agnostic adapters are those folks who want to put the money in, change the infrastructure, update it, put the bandage on the wound, but not address the fact that there's also a terminal disease on the patient, right? And there's a lot of reasons for that, right? If you are a politician that is beholden to energy interests, it doesn't behoove you to talk about the greenhouse gas emissions of your energy benefactors. You're going to want to talk about agnostic adaptation, right? So when it comes to discussing what exactly needs to be done in terms of, okay, we're getting some adaptation funding. We're talking about the drainage infrastructure, right, in South Florida, which needs to be rapidly adapted to the swiftly rising seas, right? Because we drain with gravity right now, mostly. And the ocean's rising, and the differential between the water in the system and the water out of the system is going away. So, what needs to happen, right? And this is a journalist saying something that a journalist is able to say in terms of should, right? Because we are for transparency in the political system. There needs to be a lot more transparency in the political system as to who is funding people, right? Who are your decision makers beholden to? And there also needs to be a lot more knowledge and a lot more interest from people who have their whole lives at stake in South Florida in the system of decision making and in the processes and rituals of decision making, so that when it comes to making decisions about what infrastructure is going to get fixed and what greenhouse gases are going to be mitigated, right? There are really, really big point sources of emissions within Miami-Dade County. Our dump is one of the largest point sources of emissions in the county, right? What are we doing about mitigating the methane that is coming from that emission? What are we doing about mitigating the emissions that are coming from our wonderful highways and gas guzzling cars, right? How do you get people involved in those discussions? So that's sort of where some of the things don't add up. And if a journalist is going to be able to make any kind of prescriptive recommendation, it's for transparency and more involvement of people in the system.
So Yoko, I think that that Mario has teed you up perfectly, right? Because so much of the work that the CLEO Institute does is really about knowledge and interest, right? How do we continue to educate the right audience, the right people that are the decision makers that have the power and the opportunity to make that kind of change? And if we had more institutes like the CLEO Institute and many more organizations out there championing these conversations and this cause, I think we may possibly be in a better place. But if we're going to be honest, we can't even get to a point that to have our governments agree on how to deal with electric vehicles and how we want to move forward, right? Some of the more basic conversations that are happening at this moment. So what role does education play in building this climate resilience mindset? And what initiatives specific? Because I know the CLEO Institute has worked with so many organizations and schools and corporations. What initiatives has CLEO implemented to empower our community and other communities to really engage in the right kinds of conversations?
First of all, I need you to come with me to speak to several funders and say what you just said, that we need many CLEOs around the country, because you're speaking my language. So thank you for that. It means a lot. There are so many ways, but to answer your questions first is, education is fundamental in building resilience in our communities, for better prepared communities to be, climate ready, the kind of climate we're living through now. A huge effort needs to happen in our communities, especially our most vulnerable communities that are struggling to make meets end. And that is more than 60% of our entire population here in Miami-Dade. So majority of Miami-Dade's communities are really, really vulnerable. There are extreme weather events from really going under the poverty line. And so we have centered a lot of the work on equipping these underserved communities, these marginalized communities, into being better prepared for extreme heat, better prepared for hurricanes, better prepared for flooding. And we have partnered with Pete and Pete's team and the county in bringing these trifecta extreme weather events into our communities. This particular year has been a concerted effort through many other partners and organizations to make sure our community members understand that when there is a feel like temperature of 105 of 110, there are life risk, health risk to them, and what to do about it. But at the same time, we are educating our elected officials. At the same time, we're educating the public at large with our public service campaigns or with our advocacy efforts. We went to Tallahassee this year to lobby. We brought more than 252 students, and I am so appreciative of the work that Barry University does to prepare our future leaders. But we brought them to be participatory of our legislative process and advocate for certain policy changes like heat protection for outdoor workers. Unfortunately, we were not successful. Our state government preempted us. Thankfully, we have champions in our local county government here that are still pushing forward for those kind of protections. But at the same time, we're advocating with the federal government to make sure that OSHA passes a very bold and robust extreme heat protection. So our work is multifaceted, again, bottom up, top down, but education is key. And we at the CLEO Institute believe in education in action. Education is the first step. The next thing is to make sure everybody hones into that agency component to better advocate themselves, to better demand for the policy changes that we need. Because as Mario mentioned, it is inconvenient for many of our politicians to take action. And right now, what we're doing is wasting taxpayers' dollars and just putting band-aids to a huge problem without turning the faucet of the overflowing bathroom. And we keep mopping those floors and using towels, which are the equivalent of our taxpayers' dollars, to mop this floor that consistently continues to be overflowing. So again, it cannot be monolithic. It needs to be multifaceted. And at the CLEO Institute, we played a part. It's collaborative. We're not the only ones. We need all of us. And that's why I'm so excited about these type of conversations that we're hosting today.
That's fantastic. I'm going to come back in a second to you to talk and expand a little bit more about that. But I did want to mention to our participants and our viewers that you are able to ask questions using the Q&A function of the webinar. We have here, as you can see, an expert panel that is ready to answer those questions and help us understand better what is happening. But Yoka, you mentioned the incredible need to have a collaborative approach to the work that's being done. You mentioned the work that that the CLEO Institute is doing with Pete Gomez and the county. Maybe you can expand a little bit on that, but you also use the word education and the importance of education. And as everyone on this panel knows, that speaks directly to what we are as an educational institution of higher learning here at Barry University. And maybe you can also talk about the important role that we can play here at the university level, not just Barry. I mean, Barry's helping lead this conversation, but we have such a wealth of high-performing, well-positioned universities and colleges here in South Florida. How do you see the role of higher education playing in the work that needs to be done?
CLEO for the longest time has been, and I should start for those who may not know who founded the CLEO Institute. The CLEO Institute was founded by a force to be reckoned with, a science teacher who the scientific community came to her as an educator and said, "We need your help. We need you to help us translate these complex scientific terms so the lay public, the general public can understand." And so since the beginning, we have partnered with local academic organizations through this last 14 years and translating that scientific research into our programming. So we have worked alongside many organizations, just like we do with you at Barry University, and making sure that we're using data-driven and scientific research in guiding our policy priorities as well as our programming in our community. So I think that's something that has been at the core of the CLEO Institute. And then lastly, to span on the trifecta trainings, I know that Pete can certainly speak more in depth about this. This was a true collaborative approach. Again, county agencies and CBOs like us and the CLEO Institute and local churches and community centers where all of us got together to make sure that communities were better prepared for extreme heat, flooding, and hurricanes. So understanding the threats, understanding the preparedness efforts, understanding what to do in the circumstances. I mean, and I'll pass the bucket to Pete so he can speak on the emergency management response. But they have been so well received. In fact, we keep getting asked to do more and more, and we did them virtually, we did them in person, and we also did them in the three predominant languages in the community, because again, it's all about centering equity and inclusion and the work that we do, because we'll never be resilient if it's only meant for a few.
Thank you for that. Pete, do you want to expand a little bit on the importance of these collaborations, in particular in the work that you're doing right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, when you deal with somebody like Yoka, you you don't have a choice but to collaborate. But I'll tell you this, she's an incredible partner, right? And it's not just her, it's Olivia, it's her whole organization. When we came into the mayor's purview, the mayor had a vision what she wanted to do with this, and she put Yoka and I in contact right away. And we started talking and we started collaborating and putting together what we wanted to do. You know, in between all that, we did a pilot program with the National Weather Service where, like Yoka says, we put out heat advisories. Now we're getting them almost daily. Last year was record number of heat advisories went out. And what the Weather Service did was they lowered the temperature of when you're going to put out a heat watch or a heat warning. In other words, you know, when it's going to really affect the people. We put those notifications out. Now it seems like almost daily. And what that does is it triggers certain departments within the county to go out and open their doors so that the homeless can come in, the people that need to go in there, and they're basically cooling centers. They come in, they cool off. We have a group that goes out to the homeless population. They give them water, they give them hydration packs, they give them cooling towels. So it's a very progressive type of response, to the point that now Broward County has adopted the same type of program and they're putting out same notifications. So you see it growing a little bit. But on top of that, like Yoka said, we reached out with her help to all the other non-governmental organizations, the Miami Institute, all the core groups, the community-based organizations, so that we can listen. I mean, we sat in all these meetings and we listened to them say, hey, what is it that you guys need from us, the training that you want? And with the CLEO Institute's help, we put together a training program for heat, flood, and hurricanes. And like she says, we're putting it on a regular basis, right? We've instituted this training program into our community emergency response teams. It's called CERT, which are like force multipliers that go out into the community. We build these teams in the community, and there are eyes and ears to what's going on at the very macro local level, right? And we train these folks and they go out and do it. As a matter of fact, Yoka, you'll be happy to hear this. Our CERT program was just recognized by the state of Florida as the CERT program of the year because of all the work that they've done. And they responded to Hurricane Ian a couple of years ago. They went to the West Coast last year. They went and deployed this year to help communities that have been impacted by these hurricanes. But it is a collaborative effort, and we listen, right? We have these community meetings where everybody comes and they tell us what it is that they want. I will say one key factor that's missing from this equation is getting developers involved into this conversation, right? And I know for a fact that there are some developers that are very proactive in wanting to provide some kind of resilient communities, right? I can mention names like David Martin, for example, from the Terra Group, very proactive. He's great. And he's not the only one, right? It takes everybody, right? From the private industry to the non-governmental organizations like the CLEO Institute and government to try to make this change. But I tell you, I'm ecstatic about the work that we're doing with CLEO and what we got planned for the future.
again, this collaboration and this work is powerful, right? And there's a lot of work that's being done. And I keep hearing over and over, right, this need to bring so many others around the table to have, first of all, to build the awareness, but also to build these kinds of allegiances that we're going to need in order to really make the impact. But the reality is here in South Florida is that there's always this top-down pressure of finding ways to generate and create economic growth for our region, right? Every city faces this, every region faces this. It's what helps us maintain our financial stability and our financial sustainability. But with that pressure, how can local governments then, and this is for all of you now, I'll open it up to the entire panel, how can local governments effectively balance this pressure of economic growth with the need for sustainability, particularly in the vulnerable coastal cities like Miami? How do we do this?
I, for one, do not have that answer because, it's an issue, right? Everybody wants to live in paradise, and that's, we live in paradise, but how do we keep people from wanting to move into paradise? And, we keep, building up. And where do we build up? We build along coastal communities. So I don't have that answer. I know that we need to get elected officials and senior leadership involved in that conversation, but it's a tough conversation because of the economic impact it has on the community.
And we have a great start because we do have a mayor that has always been very engaged in our efforts, to build this infrastructure of sustainability for our community. Mario, I know you wanted to chime in on this.
Yeah, two thoughts. First of all, every crisis is a ladder, right? In the sense that we're going to have to learn and we're going to have to adapt down in South Florida in ways that become economically viable to sell, right? We're going to have to generate knowledge. We're going to have to create companies. We're going to have to figure out ways to waterproof stuff that you didn't even think you had to waterproof. And we can sell that knowledge elsewhere, right? There's a lot of exciting stuff going on in terms of blue-green economy in South Florida. There's a lot of green tech innovation, blue-green tech innovation going on. That's a great, fun, amazing conversation to be a part of. Second is that you have to confront the grief, right? And this is a heavy subject, right? You're looking at possibly the death of your city by the hands of an angry, swollen sea, right? This is not fun. But you exist in an economic system that recognizes, for some reason, the possibilities of infinite growth, which is a fiction. And so when your municipal debt, right, when your town's ability to pay for future infrastructure is predicated upon ideas of infinitely being able to extract from the ecosystem around it, how do you deal with that? And I think this entire region needs to have a conversation, a serious, sober conversation around grief, around death, around debt, and around the ability of our cities to finance themselves through the same growth machine that got us here to this point. What that's going to look like, I have no idea, right? But it's a conversation that needs to be had and that artists need to be a part of, and that people who understand what grief is need to be a part of. And also folks who understand different economic paradigms of bioregional financing need to be brought into the fold as well.
Wonderful. I'm going to pause, Yoka, if you want to contribute to that, or
I'm just going to say mic drop to Mario. But I want just to add on to that, because we are living exciting times in Miami-Dade County, and we heard the mayor said that Miami-Dade County has been dubbed ground zero for climate-related impacts. And lately I've been saying yes, but we're also becoming ground zero for climate solutions. The new designation of Miami-Dade County as a climate tech hub, the only one in the country, and many other things that are happening in our region are a testament that in the midst of challenges, there are great opportunities. And so no question, this is a very difficult existential issue for us, for all of us. It's a heavy issue. And I will, say it is an inconvenient truth that many of us have not wanted to face. But I think it is only until we decide to address that elephant in the room, we won't be able to move forward because the solutions exist as we discussed it. Now, the problem is time is not in our side. We need speed and scale in our solutions, both in mitigation and in adaptation. And to do that, what we have, it's an action gap. And so it will take the political will and the collective will of all of us to get out of this. And for that, we need to acknowledge that we have a problem so they can then move into the solution phase. And that's what's lacking right now. Thankfully, Miami-Dade County has great leadership, as Pete said. But unfortunately, the carbon pollution that we're putting into the atmosphere, it affects us all. And so we need everybody, our global collective action to be able to curb this issue. But we can lead. And I think we have the capability and we're doing it now.
So I couldn't agree with you more. I do believe that we are right now ground zero for solutions, right? And that in large part is due to the many, many individuals and organizations that are here in South Florida helping us think through what the potential solutions are. We have the participants that have joined the webinar are listening in, and I would venture to guess that many, if not all of these participants are heavily engaged in these conversations and are highly interested in what we can do to provide those solutions. And I have a couple of questions here I want to share with the group, and it really speaks to what you just mentioned in terms of our carbon emissions. So this comes from Ida Curtis, and it says, nature-based solutions have the capacity to be carbon positive, draw down carbon in addition to mitigating the effects of climate change. And in big, bold letters, why are we not demanding more of these? So we still see a lot of gray infrastructure being proposed. We should be restoring wetlands and planting mangroves at global scales, etc. Here's another great question and comment for us to consider. Let me open it up again to our experts here and get your reaction.
I would say that
Go ahead, Yoka.
I think the back-based study that is being done is done by the Army Corps of Engineer, is one of those projects that is using nature-based solutions in their advice to government. I don't know the totality of it. Yoka might know a little bit more than me, but I know that they are looking at nature-based solutions for mitigating efforts and also reducing carbon footprint.
Yeah, you took the example I was going to use, speed, but I was just going to say to Aida and I know she knows this, is the first version of the draft that the Army Corps brought to us did not have nature-based solutions. It was a lot of gray infrastructure, and the community demanded the county and demanded them to go back to the drawing board and come back with a community-based plan that incorporated heavily nature-based solutions. But I agree with Aida that we should be demanding them more. We should be demanding more nature-based solutions and maybe codifying it in somehow in our requirements in RFP that X amount is considered. I'm not a city planner, and that's why experts like Aida Curtis exist. I will say, there are policy opportunities coming in our county. There's an ordinance that, the county commission will vote on impervious surfaces coming up in next month that will alleviate in the flooding with our flooding issues. But absolutely, it is up to us to be demanding it. And I think we absolutely need to be demanding them more, going back to her point.
Mario.
I would just add that, sort of challenge folks here to try and come up with markets for nature-based solutions, right? Well-regulated, transparent markets that allow people to finance and trade the system for putting these solutions out there. Because right now, you can have the debate about it. You can get the Army Corps of Engineers to implement it in its plans. But why aren't folks going out there and planting mangroves or regenerating seagrass? Frankly, because the market doesn't put a price on those seagrass beds, even though they are some of the most powerful carbon sinks that we've observed in nature up until this point. So, a lot of the challenge here in South Florida, right? We are a regional finance hub for Latin America. It's getting the economists and the money crowd to understand and value nature in such a way that you can get the money down to the projects.
Yeah, I agree.
Fantastic.
And there's so many examples out there that putting the true cost of nature, all the incredible benefits, and making sure that when we're actually evaluating cost benefit analysis, we're actually truly accounting the benefits that nature provides us, because normally has been traditionally the issue. We have not been doing the real cost benefit analysis when we're weighing in those issues.
So we're at T-8 minutes here, right? So we have a couple of questions that we're going to direct, but I did want to let our participants and our viewers know that keep submitting your questions. If we don't get to them here, which we won't get to all of them, we will be going back and answering these questions and putting it as part of the webinar that's being recorded. So, but Ada had a follow-up, and Pete, this goes directly to you because you talked about the importance of having our developers on board, right? And working closely with the developers in South Florida. And she's asking, do you think we can require carbon calculations for construction projects and incentivize a reduction of carbon footprints? Yes, Mario, that was going to be my same reaction, but Pete, what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a great idea. It's a great concept. Those are issues that would be addressed by the Department of Regulatory and Economic Regulations, RER. Definitely out of my wheelhouse, but it's not a bad concept when we can do that. And again, Yoka mentioned it, there are legislative, that sounds like a legislative item that can be brought to the attention of the mayor and the commission and move forward.
I will just add that, the problem with this, the reason, and Mario did touch on it a bit, it's like we're not looking at the true cost of carbon, right? We're not taking in consideration all the externalities, all the things that carbon pollution is doing to our society, right? And so putting some sort of carbon calculation requirement in these construction projects will probably even out the game field, because I think, again, we haven't been taking into consideration all the damage that this carbon pollution is doing to our community. So we will be looking at a more even set of benefits and costs.
I have also here, and I want to recognize that we have Johan Moore, who's a member of the Miami Beach Resident Sustainability Committee and was appointed by Commissioner Laura Dominguez. And he has a couple of questions here, and I want to at least get to one or two of them. He's asking speakers if the panel can address the possibilities of biomethane for ships. Admittedly, it's not yet employed technology, but to help with the municipal waste versus current landfill and incinerator approach. A pretty deep question.
Yeah.
I think it's an important one.
That's a great one. I don't know of any shipping line that is currently burning biomethane. I know that Maersk has an order out, and please correct me on this if I'm wrong, for 20 ships to be powered by ammonia. And it has a bunch more ships that are going to be powered not by traditional bunker fuel, but by liquefied natural gas. I think there may very well be a circular economy opportunity there to take biomethane from a dump if you can capture it, get it to a certain grade, liquefy it, put it on a cruise ship to actually sell that to a cruise line here in Miami, if that's where Johan's going. And if somebody has that idea, I'd love to write about it.
I will second that. And I think, Johan, thank you for your great questions. You always bring great questions to me as well. But we do have cruise ships that are using natural gas or fossil fuel-based gas. So to run ships with biomethane doesn't seem so far-fetched. And a lot of cruise lines need to get rid of the excess food and their organic waste. They do dump it out into their ocean. So there might be as Mario mentioned, a circular economy possibility, not only on the outside, but also within. So making use of that waste that they're dealing with anyway. I mean, we need to remind ourselves that some of these cruise lines are hosting 10,000 people on board. So that is a lot of bio waste that they need to deal with. So thanks for that. I mean, I wish I had a better answer, Johan, but I'm sure there's somebody out there thinking about it. If you can think it, you can do it.
So many great ideas and possibilities here, and we're down to the wire. So I want to give you each your last 30-second elevator pitch, right? Because this conversation has been powerful, it's been educational, it's been provocative. But for those that are not as deeply embedded in this conversation and in the work that you're doing, it could present itself as something almost overwhelming, right? So this last question is really for each of you to take a few seconds to answer. Is there anything to really be optimistic about? What is their optimism out there regarding the efforts that are being made and the potential future that we have?
Listen, there's a lot of positive things. Number one is the Dolphins are coming back. Okay, let's all keep that in mind. Right? The Dolphins. All right, but take a look at what the mayor has tasked us to do. Right after one of the flooding events, she said, "Hey, I want better cooperation. I want better collaboration, not only with the county but all the cities, all these agencies, to make sure when we get an event, when we know about it, we start preparing, right? We start getting ready. We get the messaging out so that the community knows what's coming. We give them the risk. We tell them the threats. And once the event happens, we're more coordinated in our response." And just recently, we rolled out our flood response plan, which has been in production for a while now, but we finally are rolling it out. And that was one of those efforts, right? So that we can have more coordination amongst the 34 cities, the county, and everybody else associated with it. And along with that comes the educational component that Yoka speaks about, where we go out and educate everybody. So I think those are all positive things that are happening, along with everything that Yoka is talking about, everything that Mario's talking about. There's a lot of good synergy taking place. We just have to continue to pound it.
Yoka, give us your 30-second pitch here.
I don't know if I can do it in 30 seconds. This is a big existential crisis, but I will say I'm very optimistic. The Biden-Harris administration passed the biggest historic climate legislation in this country, which has created more than 300,000 jobs. It has reduced millions on energy costs. It is targeting, and we're on our way to hit our 2050 target of decarbonizing our third biggest sector of carbon pollution, which is the transportation sector. Clean renewable energy like solar is cheaper than coal and oil now. It's definitely competitive in other markets with gas. So we're bringing electric buses into our school districts right here in Miami-Dade, to put an example. And just this year alone, the CLEO Institute has been leveraging currently with different partners, universities, municipalities, county, state, more than $500 million in federal funds for implementation projects right here in Florida. And so to me, that is enough opportunity. It's enough to keep us inspired and pushing for more, because we do have the momentum. Again, this is a solvable issue and we can do this.
Fantastic. Mario, why don't you bring us home?
The hour is late. The ocean is rising. Pessimism is a luxury Miami cannot afford. And that's that, folks.
Fantastic. I don't think I could have said it any better. I cannot thank you enough. First of all, for taking the time to engage in such an important conversation, but more importantly, for all of the incredible work that you're doing on behalf of all of us here in South Florida, that oftentimes we are not the best at paying attention to what's happening around us until the crisis hits. But we know that there are those of you that are out there that are leading the way, that are being the champions for what needs to happen in this great community we call home. So thank you all for being part of this conversation. I want to thank all of the folks who put this together behind the scenes, and in particular for all the participants who attended and listened in. We look forward to more conversations and more partnerships and more opportunities to help make this great city and the county that we call Miami-Dade the best place to live. So thank you very much, everyone, and have a wonderful afternoon.